own shop in the house. So there was a lot of things going on, and I didn't get my first dirt bike until I was, well, it wasn't even a dirt bike. It was a Harley Davidson 50cc.
Okay.
Kind of like, was a street bike. And I was 10 years old when I got that bike and rode it all over the farm and driveway and dirt roads and strip mines. For 3 years, I rode that thing. Somehow it never really broke down. and then the next bike I got was a 160 Honda Scrambler. And what a different machine. A lot bigger bike, of course, a lot heavier, more horsepower. And just kept riding. Didn't even know what motocross was because it hadn't even landed on American shores yet. And we got in, I had a friend that was 16. He had his driver's license when I had the 160 Honda Scrambler. I was probably, 13 when I got it.
Right.
Rode it for about a year or so. Well, we would sneak out on the roads and ride all over the highways. And we got in a crash with another guy that we were riding with. And it was bad. We were like taken to the hospital in ambulance, and everybody was knocked out. 3 of us, because I was riding double with my friend. And anyway, we weren't hurt too bad.
How, you were riding on the street, but you obviously didn't have a license yet.
No, I didn't. So my friend had a license. Who was 16. He was riding my bike. And then there was another guy that was friends with us. He was riding his 305 Super Hawk Scrambler, I think it was called. Or just a Super Hawk, wasn't a Scrambler. Anyway, we were climbing some hills in the strip mines the other end of town. And then we were coming back, and the guy that was behind us, he didn't know we were going to take this left turn.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like a 90-degree turn. It was more like a Y turn. Well, the guy, I was riding on the back with the other guy for a while because his bike was bigger, had more horsepower on it, whatever. And he was setting up for the corner. And when he set up from the outside, all of a sudden he leaned the bike to cut across. Well, the guy on my bike thought we were going on up the hill like we usually do. And he T-boned us, like really hard.
And I mean, at that point, I mean, were you thinking that maybe motorcycling isn't for you, or I mean, did it?
No.
You know, because a lot of us fell down on small bikes when we first started to ride. It happened to me. I know it happened to a lot of guys. And sometimes it's, you know, you think that, well, maybe this isn't for me, and this chapter is going to close right away. But apparently, it didn't for you, and you kept right on going.
No. Not when we knew everybody was okay. Not hurt too bad. I mean, I was hamburger meat. Nobody had a helmet on.
Yeah.
And luckily, we didn't get hurt very bad.
Okay.
But my fear was my dad's going to find out my motorcycle was filed down on the road because it was sliding so long.
Mm-hmm.
The cases, and it was just mangled all up.
So let me ask you, when you did get the bike home and you saw your dad again, tell me about that conversation.
That wasn't good. He was wondering what the hell happened.
Right.
And then, obviously I had to tell him because one of the guys' dads came and picked the bikes up, dropped it off at my house. So my dad could see it, of course. And when I told him what happened, he was furious. And he said, "That's it. I'm selling that bike. You're not going to have it anymore." And it sat for at least a month or more. And then, I don't know, I guess he got over being mad. And we ended up making a hill climber out of it because that's what he used to do. My dad used to hill climb.
I see.
And so we, put knobby tires on it, took everything off that we could, and it became a hill climber, which I did enter some hill climbing events, local, stuff. But I was riding it more like a motocross bike then, just riding in the fields, strip mines, climbing hills, always riding it in the dirt. And when I was still 13, a friend of mine that I went to school with, the guy that he worked with was taking him and some of his other man friends, older friends,
Sure.
to a motorcycle race. And it just happened to be one of the races. It was about an hour from where I lived in Ohio, where Edison Dye brought the top Europeans over. I believe this was in '68. Anyway, Dave Bickers was there. I learned of these riders later. Joao Robert, DeCoster, a lot of the Czech riders.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just mind-blowing to me. I was running all over those hills, watching every corner and hill, and with my jaw dropped down. I was just so into it that I knew that's what I had to do. That's what that's what I'm going to end up doing.
So how soon
Somehow.
after you saw that race with DeCoster and Robert and the hill climbing on the Honda, how soon after was your first motocross race? What bike were you riding there?
It was actually the next year.
Okay.
Because while I was out riding, I met other guys. You could ride from my house, the farm. You could ride, and there was different areas we'd meet other people in, and everybody was riding. And anyway, I met a good friend that became a good friend. He was a lot older than me. His name was Dale Burton, and he was probably about 13, 14 years older than me.
Right.
So he taught me a lot, and he liked riding with me when I was out riding. And anyway, he offered, hey, why don't you come to a race with me? I'll go into a hare scramble. And I asked my parents, and they kind of knew of him. So they said, yeah, you can go. And that was actually my very first race, was a hare scramble. At the time, I was on a Sherpa S Taco.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we kind of graduated up to from the 160 Honda. And then after that, didn't do too well in the hare scramble. It was real muddy, and I didn't have the right kind of tires on. And my front fender was too close to the front tire, so it got clogged up with mud and was skidding along. But anyway, Dale started taking me to the races, and it was mostly motocross races after that. So like pretty much every weekend I was going to a motocross race. And the very first motocross race that I ended up racing at was the same track that I saw the European guys race on, just by coincidence.
Okay.
And that's when it started. I kept going with Dale for I don't know how many races, maybe 6, 7 races. And then I kept bringing home these trophies. So my parents got kind of interested. They wanted to see what was going on. So they took me to a race, and then they liked it. And then they started taking me to races.
Well, that was good that you did finally get some support from them, and you began doing better at that. Were you on CZ there for a while too, before the Husky or just after the Husky?
Yeah, actually, I was on after the Sherpa Taco. I got on that 400 Husky you were talking about.
Yes.
And I raced that for a long time, over a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did get when I traded that bike in for the next Husky, new Husky, the dealership gave me the new bike straight across. Didn't have to pay anything for it. So they kind of started sponsoring me. And that was a new Husky. I rode that for a while, and then CZ wanted to sponsor me another local dealership, and I raced the CZs for a year or more. And that's what I started my pro career on, was a CZ. That's when I first started doing the Trans Am circuit.
Right.
And that was on the CZ. But that didn't last very long because, I don't know, the thing kept breaking down on me. It was mostly ignition parts. And, I didn't have a mechanic or anything.
Right. This is on the CZ?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting story. I mean, I don't want to stay on this subject too long, but it is pretty interesting because the dealership said, we'll fly you to California,
mm-hmm.
arrange for you to be picked up by Jimmy Weinert,
yeah,
because he's racing for CZ too. And they had a whole team. The Czech riders were over here racing the Trans Am circuit. So they flew me and my bike to California. Weinert picked me up at the airport. Went to the first race in Carlsbad with Jimmy, and we were like total opposites because
yeah,
at the time I was a real shy farm boy type guy, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and Weinert was flamboyant, guitar playing, singing in the pits, even at some of the races.
Now,
And
I well, you described Jimmy perfectly. I mean,
yeah,
he was flamboyant and with the guitar. And now the thing is, I spoke to Weinert about this one time, and
uh-huh.
I don't think I spoke to him about it during his interview. Maybe I did, but the thing was, CZ sends Weinert to the airport, and he's looking for this kid named Dale Burton.
Right.
And you mentioned earlier that Dale Burton was a little bit older than you, but he had a big influence on your career. So you get a ride with CZ, but you're not really old enough to have a license or anything, and you show up as Dale Burton.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I had to go under FIM and AMA. I had to go under his name because at the time I was 17, but you had to be 18 to have a professional license.
Yeah.
And so Dale said, "Well, we can fix that." And it was a like laminated big card, and it had your little headshot glued onto the card.
Right.
You know, you just cut it out of a picture and glue it onto the card. That was it. And we took his off, put mine on, and then every time I went to sign up, which you could sign up at the races, I went up when the line was real busy and they were in a hurry. They never bothered to read the back of my card. I was always afraid they might do that and say, "Well, you're not 33 years old." And I got away with it. And that whole Trans Am circuit, I went as Dale Burke.
So
I didn't tell anybody.
so Weinert and everybody in the pits, whether you're signing up or wherever you are, they know you as Dale Burton for the whole Trans Am series that year.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they're calling your name over that loudspeaker and you're winning or you're doing well in a race, they're saying Dale Burton.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was Dale Burton. Yeah.
Well, at what point then did Husqvarna take an interest in you as a rider?
Well, after hitchhiking my way around the Trans Am circuit and getting different rides with different people
Mm-hmm.
to make it from race to race, see, my parents were like, "Well, if you don't make enough money to keep going from race to race, you're going to have to come back home and finish high school." I didn't even finish high school. I
Okay.
only went through my sophomore year. So luckily, I did make enough money to keep going and finished up the Trans Am circuit. And then the Florida Winners Series was coming up next in 72 down in Florida. And it was a pretty big deal at the time. A lot of teams were there, and top riders went there to train and get ready. And I was riding the CZ, and I was breaking down. Rolf Tiblin was team manager of the Husky team, which had a big team down there. And he said, "Would you like to try one of our bikes in a race?" So he let me do that, and I did well. And then he actually started putting me on the team right away.
So
That's how I got my first Husky ride.
So Rolf Tiblin was responsible for you getting the Husky ride.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. In 72.
tell me about the seven. I'm going to talk about the 74 season, of course, because you won a Supercross championship for Husky. But tell me about the 73 season a bit and you first getting your ride there and what happened that season in 73.
Well, in 72, they just gave me bikes and parts and a van when I didn't have to travel too far.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I had to travel far, I usually rode in a cycle liner, which was like a big race team truck, but it was super slow, and it was a library bus is what it actually was. But they made it into hauling all the bikes for the team, and I raced the rest of that series like that. 73 was a little better. I got a salary, got works bikes and parts,
Mm-hmm.
and still did a lot of the traveling in the cycle liner. Might have had no, I don't think I had any flights that year. I actually ended up buying a little motorhome with a van on the front, and I could drive myself to the races with some friends or whatever, other riders. It was a big uh, caravan where a lot of riders had to drive at that time. So we became good friends and hung out together.
So who else were you hanging out with at that time, Gary? Give us some names of the guys who were just getting into the game too. Who was there?
Oh, I like Galen Mosier, Rich Irestead, Jim West, Billy Clemens, Mark Blackwell, Brad Lackey, and Weiner, and
well, quite a cast of characters.
Yeah, like Tim Hart. I mean, and then some of the mechanics, we all became good friends too, and they were traveling with us. And then when they were back around Ohio, we'd all go to the farm. Everybody loved being at the farm.
At your house?
My parents would let them stay there. 100-acre farm. We got a pretty good sized house. They're sleeping on the carpet and sleeping bags and in their vans. And, we're just working on the bikes and going riding, practicing, having a great time on the farm.
And and that like would happen for what, a week in between a couple of different races, or how long did that go on for?
Well, yeah, usually a week or two. If the races weren't too far apart, we away from there, we'd come back to there. And throughout the year, nationals, Trans Ams, there'd be times we'd stay there for probably 3 weeks.
Okay. Now, you did take Husky to that Supercross championship in '74 on the open bike. Yeah. Let's it seems Supercross is just in our face today, and we hear and see so much of it. But it had to be a big change from being outside and racing at places like, well, in Pennsylvania or New York, Unadilla, whatever it may have been. What was the big adjustment for you on that Husky going into some stadium races?
Well, I think it was a big adjustment for everybody because it was new to everybody. Mm-hmm. And just the confines of it, being the track being so much shorter and more narrow, and all the there wasn't too many obstacles, but there was obstacles. And as the years went on, of course, there became more and more obstacles. So I think most of the riders liked the outdoors a lot better. But it was pretty cool. We did it because we had to, and
sure,
and made the best of it.
How many races was that series that year? That first year.
That year, I want to say just 3, and one of them was a doubleheader. I think, what was it? Pontiac, Michigan, I think, was the doubleheader.
Uh-huh.
Maybe the Houston Astrodome. I don't know for sure, but yeah, there wasn't very many. That was just like the first. They had a couple individual Supercross races a year or so before that.
Yeah.
But I think that was the first series. Put a series together.
Okay. Now, you win the Supercross series on the Open Husky for them. Everything is going great, but you didn't exactly leave Husky on good terms. You and Bobby Grossi were let go. What exactly? Yeah. Tell us what led up to you and Grossi being let go from Husky.
Well, it was these mini bikes, XR75s. It became a big thing. Like, there was a lot of little pit racing things going on with the mini bike races.
Right.
At a lot of the nationals, maybe on Friday or Saturday, all the mechanics and a lot of the riders are screwing around on them, having little races. And some of the big names started to get hurt, like Torleif Hansen, which was Husky's one of the top guys for Husky, really screwed up his knee and was out for the rest of the year. Well, Husky really frowned on it and said, no more mini bike races, period. Like, you will be in big trouble if you get hurt on a mini bike. So Grossi and I got hurt, and I was stupid. You're young, you don't think nothing's going to happen. They're not around, they're not going to see it. He tore up his knee, and the next day they thought we were racing and doing this together, but we weren't. The next day I broke my elbow real bad. So we were both out. We couldn't go to the next races, and we were staying at the farm, and this was during the Trans Am circuit. The next race was in Honda Hills, and me and Grossi were so bummed out that we couldn't go to the race. We had to stay behind, and Oh man, it was bad. So I didn't know. I mean, Husky never said anything to me about you're fired, you're not riding for us anymore, whatever. So before I even got the cast off my arm, I was in my motorhome going to St. Louis, Missouri to watch that race. And then after that race, I was driving to California because I would, by that time, get the cast off my arm and be able to race Livermore and Saddleback, the last two races of the series. And when I got out there at Livermore, I realized I didn't have a bike anymore. They gave it to Howerton.
Oh, so what you're saying is, I'm thinking that, well, they didn't tell you that you and Grassi were let go, but you knew like in the next week or so. You didn't know until you drove to California that you didn't have a ride?
Right.
Wow.
And that was like at least 6 weeks
Yeah.
after I broke my arm. So I was just getting the cast off. So I was out there, and I was with Billy Grassi a lot, and Roy Turner. Billy was riding for Honda, and Roy Turner was his mechanic. And Roy said, "Well, look, I'll ask Honda if I can fix up the practice bike real good for you, and you can race it in the last two races." And Honda said, "Yeah, you can let me do that." And I got to ride it one time at a practice track before the race. And Livermore, I was riding the support class, 250 support class that year.
Yeah.
And at Livermore, I ended up 4th overall, and the Saddleback ended up 3rd overall on the bike. And I still believe today that if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have got my ride with Kawasaki.
And that's what really led to your Kawasaki ride the following year, didn't it?
Yeah, 75. I really believe it did.
Yeah. So how much better was the Kawasaki than the other bikes that you had? What was your first race? Who was your mechanic? Tell us about that.
My mechanic was Steve Johnson, and I don't think the bike that first year in 75 was as good as my Works Husky.
Okay.
It was kind of an old model. I mean, it wasn't updated very much. Still had a downpipe on it.
Mm-hmm.
It had a lot of torque. I believe it was a 450 motor. It had a lot of torque and a pretty good motor, strong motor. But I don't know. It was okay, but it's hard to tell if it was how it compared to my Husky because I never got to ride them back to back, at the same track.
Sure. It was a long time between riding that Husky and then going to the Kawasaki.
But I do know I broke 13 gearboxes that year. 13 between practice and especially at the races. Third gear would break, and Kawasaki kept trying to figure out why it was breaking. And they put new gears in it, supposed to be stronger, this and that and everything, and be out there a lot of times in practice and break third gear, broken gearbox, can't ride anymore. So it wasn't that great in the first year in 75, but 76 rolled around. Torlip Hansen and a couple other Europeans had been testing new bikes, and we had a whole new prototype bike in 76, 250 and 380. And those things were really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that made a big difference.
Was Steve your mechanic that year too in 76?
I believe he was at the beginning, but then maybe not at all in that year because that's when Weiner started riding for us too. Mm-hmm. So Jimmy and I were teammates, and Steve was his mechanic.
Yeah.
And my mechanic was Rick Jones, who was really good mechanic. So it was all good. 76 was my best year, actually.
During that time, Gary, you built a reputation as being a whole shot expert. To some people, that comes naturally. To some, it doesn't. How did you get so skilled at it? Was it something you practiced, or was that bike just that amazing? How did that work out?
I think it was just natural. I didn't really practice starts that much, hardly at all, really. I just think it was just a natural feeling that I had of, yeah.
Yeah. As I said, some guys, I asked Donnie Hanson that question, and he said, well, yeah, I kind of worked on timing and I looked at the gate, but he said he really got the nickname Hole Shot Hanson when he was riding the Can-Am. He said all of a sudden I got on this Can-Am and I'm getting incredible starts. And oddly enough, the next year for you, 77, you were on a Can-Am.
78.
78. Okay, so you had a couple
Yeah.
couple of years there on Kawasaki. You said 76 was your best year. What do you remember about the high points of that
time? Just figuring out my fitness training and getting in really, really good shape. Diet, fitness, training. Because we didn't ride. It's weird. I think back. I only rode on Wednesday. When there was a national every weekend,
Yeah.
the only day I rode was Wednesday. Because we rode so much on Sunday, there was a lot of practice, and then we raced 40-minute motos plus two laps.
Mm-hmm.
So I did fitness training, traveling usually on Monday, fitness training on Tuesday, and then motos on Wednesday. Usually would run in every morning, like run a long ways, pretty much as fast as I could. And then, 2 40-minute motos on Wednesday. Thursday was the same as Tuesday, fitness training again. Then we'd usually travel on Friday to the races. Saturday, relax, have tech inspection and all that stuff, and then race Sunday.
Race on Sunday.
Yeah, and just figuring it out, and being kind of coming into the prime of my life for being a racer.
Sure.
I think I was like 22, 23 at the time. And had everything going for me. And had the speed, won a lot of motos, like even in the Trans Am circuit. Actually, I won a few the year before on the older Kawasaki in 75, but 76 I was faster, of course, had a better bike and won more motos. And then in 77 was like, this was going to be my year, man. I got it all figured out. Carried momentum into the beginning of the series. And I was out practicing, and I got almost broke my femur, but it didn't break. It was a really bad bruise. I hit the handlebars, no crossbar or anything when I crashed, and it took out. I ended up getting a calcium deposit in it, a real big calcium deposit in my left side, and I mean, it took out my quad muscles. I couldn't use them. I couldn't put my foot out for a corner at all, and I shouldn't have raced that year, but I figured I can do it anyway. And I was winning the first Supercross race, and it was in Georgia. I was winning the first race, and 2 laps to go, my chain broke. Yeah, didn't finish. But I thought, that's cool. I can ride. My leg's going to be okay. And I got speed. So I was looking optimistic about everything. But, man, that leg kept getting worse and worse and worse every week. And now I really couldn't put my foot out for the corner. And like I said, I'd raced the whole year anyway. And I think I got 10th overall in the Supercross series that year. I think, I'm not sure. And, about the same in the Nationals. Just lost it, And our team manager, Tim Smith from Kawasaki, I heard later he's getting a lot of pressure from Japan to make some changes. So he let me go.
Yeah. Now you went to Can-Am after that, but you spent. I was reading that you said you spent a lot of time researching and developing that bike. Was it not really prepared very well, or how much time did you put in doing all the research and development on that 78 Can-Am?
Well, my mechanic, Mike Stark, was responsible for that.
Mm-hmm.
He realized the bike was too heavy, the clutch didn't work very well, it didn't have enough power, especially the open bike. The 250 was fast, but the open bike didn't have enough power. And he just went to work all year. He's really smart about it. Looked up all these aftermarket parts and contacted different companies like Olden's to build a special swing arm and suspension, and he lightened it up. And by the Trans Am circuit, it was at Unadilla at the Trans Am circuit, which was maybe the third or fourth race into the Trans Am.
Right.
That thing came together, and it was a freaking machine. It was awesome, and I started doing really well on it, and ended up this Trans Am pretty good. I was up in the top 5 all the time anyway, and that's when Honda picked me up the following year, '79.
Well, yeah, and that's was of course led to my next question. I mean, you signed with Honda '78, '79, and that seemed to be the team to be on at that time. Anybody I've spoken to that's been on those bikes during that era, whether it was Brad Lackey or any of those guys, they said it was the best bike they'd ever ridden. Would you agree with that? That during that era, that was the best bike to have?
In a lot of those years, I believe it was, but in '79 for us, um, it wasn't. It really wasn't. The open bike, anyway,
Right.
wasn't, because I got together when I signed with the head Jap guys who were over here, and they explained to me what changes they were going to do to the bike. And then when the season came along, somehow they didn't do any of those changes to it. It was just basically the same bike from '78. It was a lot heavier than a lot of the other bikes. The suspension wasn't good, especially in the back. So there I was doing, well, I had a different mechanic this time, Arnie Beeman, but we were doing with Olin's, we're working with them, and they did build us a different swing arm and moved the shocks up more and got the rear end working a lot better. But it was good, but it wasn't like what I thought it was going to be. Let me put it that way.
Right. But you went on with them for the next couple of years too, didn't you?
No, actually, it was just that year,
Oh,
'79.
Oh,
I
okay.
was third overall in the 500 Nationals. I know I was 10th overall. I remember that in the 250 Supercross series, because I just didn't do that well in that one. But I thought I did pretty good overall. But I'll tell you the honest truth is, the new team manager and I didn't get along very well.
At Honda?
Yeah.
Who was that?
Terry Mulligan was on and he hired me. He was instigated me being hired by Honda. But then when the '79 season started, they brought a different team manager in. It was more of a office guy. He wasn't very experienced at the track, and reality-wise. So I kept complaining in the beginning that the bike wasn't working very well, and we needed to change these things on it. And I think overall, my big mistake was I found out the phone number of Japan, and instead of going through Honda in America, I went directly to Japan and talked to, well, one of the head guys in there about our problems here and why don't we have these parts.
Yeah.
And that was like cutting my own throat.
Yeah.
That was a very bad thing to do.
Yeah, going over his head like that, sure.
I learned later. So anyway, yeah, that's when I lost that ride in '79. And then in '80, I rode for LOP, Lorenz Offner Products.
Yeah. What bike?
Satellite team.
What bike were you on there at LOP? What was he? What did he have for you? Yamaha?
Yeah, we were on Yamahas.
Right.
Yeah. I had a mechanic that liked to make the bike real clean and shiny, but he wasn't a very good mechanic. I mean, he got these special titanium forks with the titanium boots on them. I mean, bottoms on them.
Yeah.
But they were terrible. They didn't work. They were light, but they didn't work good. And sometimes the motor wouldn't be right. I just had a lot of problems that year, mechanical problems that year.
In 1982, Gary, you decided to take your own Hondas and go after a world championship in Europe. How did that come about? How'd you get the bikes there? I mean, that's a bold move for a guy who's been at it for a few years, and then decides you're going to go to Europe. How did that all happen?
Yeah. Well, before that, I was racing 81 as full-on privateer.
Yeah.
And I was riding my own Yamahas, bought bikes, everything. Hired my own mechanic. Went to the first national at Hangtown, got third overall. And then Yamaha and Suzuki wanted me for a support rider to ride production bikes. I was trying to get a ride from Yamaha, but they wouldn't do, hardly even talk to me. And then I got third in the first national on a production bike, and they want me to ride for them. So did Suzuki. I ended up riding for Suzuki and did fairly well that year. Was top privateer, and they was gonna give me more money and more bikes and parts and a better deal for 82, but it was still on production bike. And I felt at the time, if I'm on a works bike, I can still win.
Sure.
So that's when I decided to go to Europe. And I had become good friends with Graham Noyce, who in '79 was 500 world champion.
Yeah.
And he would stay at my house when he was over here in California doing on the Trans Am series. Anyway, we became good friends, and he set me up with his mechanic's brother. So I didn't have to take my own bikes over there. I was going to get bikes from Honda of Germany, the distributor. And Graham supposedly set it up with a guy that he knows in the distributorship there in Germany. So I got an offer to go to La Touquet to race that big beach race.
Yes.
And that got me over there, expenses. Did that race, and then after the race, I took a train, went to Honda Germany, to train station, got a taxi, went to Honda Germany from the train station. And I just got there in time before they closed for the weekend, and nobody even heard of me. They didn't know I was coming over there. They didn't know anything about it.
Huh.
So luckily I met one of the Honda riders of Germany there. Manfred Schäuble was his name. Real friendly guy. And he said, well, until you figure it out, you can come stay with me. And he even let me ride his practice bike. We'd take turns riding his practice bike when he went out and practiced until I figured it out, what was going on. It was a couple weeks before the president in Honda Germany would finally make a decision if he was going to help me or not.
Had you seen Graham Noyce in between that time and say to him, Graham, what's going on? Or
no, I hadn't seen him yet.
Okay.
Because he was over in Belgium. And we don't have cell phones and stuff. You
Right.
can't just text somebody, hey, what?
Sure.
So I didn't know anything about that part of it. But one of the Honda Germany riders hurt his ankle real bad and he couldn't ride. So they said, okay, so we can see what you can do. You can have his truck and his mechanic, his bikes, and go to a couple international races, which was a popular thing there before the GPs would start.
Yes.
So he let me do that, and I did really well. And then the president decided, yeah, and he told his guy in the warehouse to set me up with 2 bikes, 2 production bikes, and some parts. And I could use this van that they had over there. So the guy, his name was Freddie. I still remember that, the warehouse guy. And he gave me a whole spare motor. I mean, wheels. He just loaded me up with parts. And I had 2 brand new production bikes. And then I drove myself to Belgium and met up with Graham and his mechanic and met his brother. I stayed at his brother's house with him, and he started working on my bikes. And Francois, Graham's mechanic, set me up with Olin's, and I went out testing with them and got Works suspension and a different pipe, Works pipe that really made a big difference from another company. And man, they just took care of me and helped me so much to get to those races. And they knew where to go, and you had to have carnets to get through the borders to go into a different country.
Sure.
And they just hooked me up, and it was nice. And I just went along with them and went to all. Well, first we did a lot of international races, and then when the GP started, then I was ready. And
well, yeah, you finished,
started
and
doing pretty good.
you did really well that year, Gary. I mean, you finished 7th in the world.
Yeah, yeah, it went really well.
And
But
the bike you were on, was it, that's a 450 or a 480 at that point?
that was a 480.
But it's a production bike.
Right,
Okay.
production. Yeah, it was a
Wow.
pretty good bike that year, though. I did get lucky, and their production bike was pretty decent. And then with the work suspension on it, the only kind of handicap was the power. It didn't have the power of the works bikes.
Other than the money that you had that you saved to get there, were you making an income with those international races and the GPs?
No, I wouldn't say it was added to my bank account.
Right.
It was just kind of break even type thing. I wasn't losing a lot of money. So I had to pay my mechanic and then pay for gas and expenses and everything that went into it.
Did we took a little break there after 82, Gary, between 82 and 87? Why the gap? What was going on there?
82 and 80. No, I went,
Well,
well, to understand what happened, and this is a good part of the story, after the first several races, I was asked Roger DeCoster, because Graham's mechanic, Francois, would say, you should talk to Roger and try to get a works bike.
okay.
So I started asking Roger about it and got him thinking about it. I'd call him when he was over in America. And he did come over for a couple races. So he was thinking about it. And after the third or fourth race, something like that, he was really getting close to setting me up with a bike. Well, we were driving to the race in Austria, and our van broke down. We weren't too far from the track, but it broke down. And I don't know how we got this nearby garage to put us everything in their truck and haul us up to the track and drop us off up there. So we were in the pit area with our tent and bikes and tools and all that stuff. And they fixed our van and brought it up the next day. At that race in Austria, I was really fast on that track on my bike. I got the whole shot and was leading the first moto for a long time, and then got passed by a couple guys, but still was running up front. And then when Graham Noyce and Andre Malherbe came up behind me, they couldn't pass me, and they were on their works bikes. I'm probably in 4th or 5th place by this time, and I didn't know it, but Japan was wondering what the heck's going on, so they sent another guy over here with more horsepower from Japan to see what was going on. Well, he's out on the track with a chalkboard telling me to let Graham pass, move over. And he wasn't even in the mechanics area. I don't know how he was out on this part of the track. I'd see him at the end of the straightaway. Guys, I was standing out there with his chalkboard. But I never even looked at the chalkboard because I figured, I'm not going to pay attention to him. And anyway, it turned out to be he wanted me to move over so Graham could pass, and Andre. And after that moto, he sent one of his guys down to my pit area to find out why I didn't let them move over. And he threatened to take all my bikes and parts away from Honda of Germany.
This is an 82 yet, Gary?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 82.
Okay. So you don't let Noyce buy, you don't let Malherbe buy either.
No. Well, Malherbe finally passed me.
Okay.
But this guy was irate. He was so mad. He wanted to know who I was and why I didn't move him over. And then when he found out I had support from Honda Germany, he wanted to take that away. Well, long story short, that week I get a call from him, and I got to go into Honda of Belgium where they were stationed, and he's gonna talk to me. I don't know what he's gonna talk to me about. But in the meantime, DeCoster got through to him, and DeCoster pulled more weight than him and said, I get a works bike. So when I went in there, he was real nice and explained to me that I get this works bikes and parts now. But I had to have the understanding that if Mellor or Noise come up behind me, I have to let them by. I can't hold them up and race with them. But I said, if I'm out in front and I don't, they're not catching me, I don't have to wait for them, do I? And he said, no, no. So I was okay with that.
Oh, okay.
That's how I ended up getting a works bike.
So, but that ended, I guess, after 82, you went back to Kawasaki.
Well, no. In 82, I had sent by the end of the series, I had signed a tentative agreement with Kawasaki of Japan.
Okay.
Because Dave Thorpe was going to Honda the next year. So they wanted me to take his place. And that was my ride for next year. So I was elated. I mean, man, this is what I wanted, to come over and do well enough to get a works bike for the following year. And it looks like I got it. So I go home to California, and I'm never getting a call, never getting the confirmed contract. I keep calling Alex Wright in England because he is the team manager for them, Kawasaki Japan, and he's never calling me back. So I keep calling and calling and calling, and finally I get a hold of him, and then he apologizes because Honda or Kawasaki of Japan pulled the budget out. They don't have a budget, so now the English distributor is doing the race team, and of course he's got all English riders. So, and this is late in the game. Everybody's signed and done deals, and that's when I can't even get a ride for next year in '83.
Mm-hmm. What did you do?
Well, over here, I got an offer from Mako, and they were supposed to have a really awesome bike in '83, and I can ride for the factory, and I was getting expenses and salary and a mechanic and truck and the whole 9 yards. So I really had a bad feeling about riding for Mako because I know how much they broke over there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but it was the only thing I could get, so I went for it. I don't even want to start that story. I can just tell you that it was a Mako Braco.
Okay.
Pretty much every time I rode the bike, it broke, practicing or racing. It was terrible. Ended up riding Honda again, a production bike before the end of that year. But, I did okay, but not well enough to get a sponsorship for '84. So I come back to America thinking, well, that's it. I'm done. I'm not going back over there, retiring. Didn't ride for quite a while. Rode a friend's Honda production bike down at a local track just for fun and thought, this is so much fun. I can't quit now.
Okay.
That's when I went back to Europe in '84 on my own dime. Bought my bikes, did everything. Long story short, had a lot of mechanical problems. Didn't have a very good mechanic. It was a different mechanic that I got to know over there when I was over before. And just had a lot of mechanical problems. And was fast, but not fast enough. And then having mechanical problems on top of that, just the results weren't there. So we were driving back to Belgium from Yugoslavia, and there was a Y in the freeway. If we go to the right, we go to the next race in Checo. If we go to the left, we go back to Belgium. Couldn't make up my mind until the last second, and then I just said, go left. And that was it. Threw in the towel.
You went back to Belgium.
Yep.
Then you came back to the States after that?
Well, I stayed there for a while to sell everything that I had bought. Yeah, and then came back to the States and was retired. Wasn't racing anymore. And that was the big lag in there, was from '84, '85. That's when I started my motocross schools and was doing that. And thought I'd try acting, which was, well, Hollywood's right here. Go to acting school, try to get a job doing that. That would be pretty cool. Doing the motocross schools on the side a little bit. And after a couple years, well, it wasn't too long. It was maybe 3 or 4 months. I got a pretty good job in acting as a stunt man on a motorcycle at the Universal Studios tour. which was making good money, working really part-time. And I got back into racing, local scene, California. And then after a couple of years of doing that, I decided this acting thing's not for me. I don't really love it like I do motocross. So I got really more back into motocross, just racing locally, doing some national events, a couple supercross events, and really pushing my motocross goals. Been doing that ever since.
Let's get into that, Gary. Tell me about some of your first students and where your schools took place.
Well, I was living in California at the time, and that's where I was doing my school, Southern California mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was a big eye opener because motocross schools back then weren't very popular, and they weren't just breaking down the doors to take lessons or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And but I kept plugging away, learning how to advertise better and getting certain riders and stuff. And I was having a good time because I could ride and practice, race on the weekend, and teach schools when I could get them. And that was pretty cool. And then the first big rider that I got was McGrath. And he took some private lessons with me through a freelancer for Cycle News. Said, this kid's really got a lot of talent. You probably ought to give him some free lessons and try to help him out. And Jeremy was 16 at the time, and that's what I did. And I could see right away that he had a lot of talent. And his like cornering speed and stuff like that wasn't too good. But even in the first lesson, the things I was telling him to do differently, he could do them differently right away, and it just make big improvements right away. So we kept working together for a long time, and he came back to stay with me in Ohio for a while too. When he was like 18 or 19, I'd be out in California all the time in the winter because after '89 I had moved back to Ohio, but I'd always go back to California for like 5 months for the winter, and would work with Jeremy. And then I stayed back in California. Ohio more, and instead of California, I started going to Florida to do schools because it's a lot less of a drive for one thing.
Right.
And then out of the blue, Jeremy calls me up, says, "Hey, I need you to come out here and train me." And that's after he won a couple. I don't know how many, but he won 125 Supercross championship by then. And I think, he won a 250 Supercross championship too. His first one, I believe. And he called me to come back out, be his personal trainer, because he wanted to get in better shape to do better in the nationals as well. So that's when all that started. And that really helped my business a lot. Worked out good for Jeremy, and we got along real good. So started getting more riders like that. John Dowd, his mechanic, talked to me, wanted me to help him. Wyndham, Lusk, a lot of 250 riders.
You worked with Villapoto too.
Yeah, later on. Ryan was still on 85s when I worked with him.
So now, Gary, tell me this: when you get a guy out there like McGrath, not when he's on a 125 or a 250, how long does he stay with you? What does a week of Gary Semics school look like to everybody else? I mean, are you on the bike? Are you talking about training, dieting, exercise? What is it like when you're working with a guy at that level?
Yeah, with Jeremy, there wasn't a whole lot of on the bike technique training at that time, just a little bit. At that time when he was 250 Supercross champion. Mm-hmm. With him, it was mostly how much to train during the week, what type of training to do, and diet, nutrition, and just keeping him on track. That he's fresh for the weekend. He can recover for what he's done during the week, and making sure that he does what he's got to do, fitness-wise, without overtraining, and that's what it was mostly about. It's a more seasoned rider like that. With Villapoto, when he was on 85s, it was still a lot of technique, and just getting the techniques down better. And a little bit of working out too, and diet. not as much, of course.
You talk about a mental game of the sport quite a bit. Mentally, what changes in a racer or needs to be changed to take him from a top five rider to a first place rider? Mentally, what has to change in that guy?
A lot of that is belief in himself, and just knowing that he can do it, he can improve more. And I was conscious of that when I was working with Jeremy when he was 18, 19, and explaining to him, giving him confidence of what kind of talent he has. I still remember talking to him about it this one time, and it was about, it's, you take a painter or a musician, they have a talent for playing an instrument.
Mm-hmm.
A painter has a talent for painting that canvas. I said, you have a talent for riding that motorcycle, and this is what you're supposed to do. You're very talented at this. And just talking to him about stuff like that. And then when he'd get a little off track, and during the week maybe he'd want to go out to Havasu and do some partying with his boat and stuff like that, and say, dude, you can do that anytime later, but this is not the time to do it. You have to keep working your craft. You have to stay on target. You can't be taking anything for granted. And he'd think about it a little bit and say, yeah, you're right. I need to keep working. He was easy to coach. He was very nice to work with. Too.
Yeah, I mean,
easygoing guy.
Are some guys not so easy to coach? Even though now there's not many McGraths in the world, and I wouldn't ask you to name a name, but have you worked with other guys that have had some incredible talent and really just couldn't put it together mentally and never went over the top?
Oh yeah, I have, and they just don't have that desire and priority to make it work, and they get sidetracked with other interests and end up wasting time and energy doing this other stuff that's not going to take them where they need to be.
Yeah. I read in an article in Racer X where you stated, and I quote, it said, a preseason racer can want it so badly that they overtrain, overthink, trying to guarantee the outcome, only to make it worse instead of better. How do some guys? How do some guys overthink it and overwork it? How?
Well, that's a good question, and that's true that a lot of guys do that, because you have to have a certain temperament and not get anxious, be able to relax and let things play out as they will, and not get ahead of yourself, not try too hard, not think that you have to overtrain to succeed. And a lot of guys do that. They want it so bad, and they focus on their training too much, and they overtrain. And it takes a combination of being motivated but not being anxious and too motivated, and being able to relax and recover, and kind of have a certain attitude and temperament that you can handle all that pressure without it stressing you out, and being relaxed with it. And the top guys can do that, like Roxon. I think he's very strong mentally. Same with Villapoto, same with McGrath. And your top champions, Carmichael, they have that mental capacity, mental attitude to not get stressed out, but still, be ready without being overly trained. And that was another thing I did a lot with McGrath, was making sure that he wasn't overtraining, especially towards the end of the week. We'd always talk about what his energy levels like, what's he feeling like. And if he was a little more tired than normal, we'd back off on the training, make sure he was fully recovered for the race.
When you watch a race, Gary, I mean, are you able to sit back, because you're into this technique thing? Obviously, you've been a trainer for so many years with the videos, and we're going to talk more about that in a moment. But can you just sit back and watch a Supercross, or is it something going on in your mind all the time with every turn or a guy's technique?
I can do both.
Yeah.
In the race, it depends how close I am to the track. If I'm real close to the track, I can see a lot of technique. And the way I kept improving when I started my motocross schools was studying the top riders at the time. And I'd go to a lot of races and I would watch real closely and notice technique and what they were doing. And then I would go out and ride that week with these techniques in my head and try them. And oh yeah, it does work a lot better. So I start riding like that. I became a lot better technical rider after my career was over.
Who were you watching, Gary? Give me an idea of who you saw back in those years that you tried to emulate, or you took their, copied their style.
But yeah, I really liked Ronnie Machine, Kevin Windham,
Mm-hmm.
and Jean-Michel Bale. Those guys had awesome style and smoothness. And I would really look at their feet and what they're doing with their feet, and especially on the rear brake, and their hands, fingers, and body movements, their upper body kind of framework, structure, how they're moving on the bike. I'd study all those things and notice them. And the more I studied them and tried them, the better I got at it.
Yeah.
And then along with that, I'm teaching riders these techniques. So I just became a technique specialist, and it just kind of came to me naturally, and I could pick up on it real easily. And I think that's what separates me even today from other guys that are teaching motocross schools, is I've had so much experience in it and feeling it on myself and teaching so many riders, just going over it and over it and over it with different riders. And then I would learn different teaching skills, how to present it, how to break the technique down even further in little separate parts. And it was like I was doing motocross schools from 85 till 91. And then I got the idea of making videos. First, they were VHS tapes. And I started my first one in 91. And I've been making new ones ever since. Now we have 29 DVDs, technique and training for motocross. And 3 years ago, I started a streaming platform where you can buy a subscription, stream everything on the site, and even download it so you can watch it when you don't have an internet connection.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have like over 80 videos.
80. And these are all available through your website and stuff like that?
Yeah. All 80 of them are on my streaming platform. And it's only, at this time, I've been running this Corona 19 lockdown special. It's only $9.99 a month.
Hey Gary,
$9 a month.
Yeah. And do you have an assistant at your schools that help you train? And I thought I read somewhere, in fact, I know I did, that you were now certifying some people to teach Gary Semics schools outside the U.S.
Yes, exactly. We have 9 certified instructors right now, and 6 of them are in Argentina, South America, Argentina and Chile. We have 2 in Spain, 1 in Germany, and my stepson is 1 here in the United States.
Do your schools run year round? Where can people learn more about that?
Well, I'm like retired now, so I'm not teaching very many schools anymore.
Right.
And David's only doing like a few select schools with riders that have been with him for a long time, like Gavin Towers, Luke Bowser, Clark, not Clark. I can't remember his first name now.
What's his last name?
Anyway, a couple other guys so that's why I started the certification thing. You can go to them, and the Corona, we were really starting to roll with new certified instructors when Corona hit. Mm-hmm. So that kind of put everything to a standstill with that. But I still want to grow that business. They become certified or trained by me, give them all the how to teach and grow their business. And all that stuff's on my website. It's all on there.
Okay. I got a few more questions, Gary, then we're going to wrap up for today. We were talking about natural talent, guys like Ron Lachine, Jean-Michel Bale. After being around the industry for close to 50 years, I would say at this point, Gary. Who would you say some of the greatest natural talents that you've ever seen?
Well, I like to say those three riders that I mentioned already, Wyndham, Bale,
Right.
And Lachine. But the newer guys now, Rosson, I think is very talented.
Mm-hmm.
Muskin,
Marvin Muskin?
yeah, Marvin.
Yeah.
Marvin Muskin.
What about Tomac?
I think Tomac is talented, but I think he's more of a physical rider.
Mm-hmm.
He's just strong. When I talk about the talent, I mean real smooth gracefulness, where they're not using a lot of physical energy to go fast.
Okay.
They just do it smoother.
Would you say Marty Tripes fell into that category way back?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Tripes was one of them.
Okay.
Early ones, yeah.
Hey, Arnie Beeman sends his regards, and he wants to know about a sign in your workshop and if it's still there.
I don't know. Probably no, because that building's not even there anymore.
Oh, what was the sign he was talking about?
I'm not sure what sign
You
he's
see, I
talking
get in
about.
trouble with that all the time. People send me questions for guys, and I ask them, and then when I ask the question, they're like, "I don't know what you're talking about, Joe." I got to be careful with this. But Arnie Beeman did send his regards, and of course, he asked about the sign. And well, anyway, that's it from that end. Gary, you know, we
let me just say a
yeah,
couple more things,
yeah,
if I could, please.
Absolutely.
We're selling our track and our home and our outbuildings, this whole facility, on 20 acres with another 30 acres of woods behind it. That's really cool, with a pond and all kind of stuff. And it's a turnkey operation. You want a motocross track, you want a training facility, if you want it for a business or to just have it for yourself to train and ride on. We got all the equipment, dozer, skid steer, tractor, attachments. Everything is here. Turnkey operation.
This is in Lisbon, Ohio?
Yeah, Lisbon, Ohio.
Oh.
It's an awesome place. We love it, but we're retired. We want to start downsizing and give this to somebody else that wants to use it, because it's really awesome. I'd rather sell it to somebody in the industry,
sure,
that's going to use it, than to just a farmer or somebody like that.
Yeah, because it's all set, and you got all the heavy equipment that goes with it, huh?
Yeah. Turnkey operation, ready to go. Got a gym in the basement, full finished basement, 3,200 square foot house, sauna in the master bathroom. I mean, it's a jewel. If you go to my website and go to the news, it's the second one down in the news. You can see tons of pictures and read all about it. The first one in my news is selling the rights to my DVD series, all 29 DVDs. Okay.
Well, it definitely snows there and gets cold in Lisbon, though, huh?
Yeah, that's why we go to Florida, or basically we've been going to North Carolina in the winters now, because it's pretty mild down there. But then you can go out and go skiing. There's some ski resorts around here in the winter.
Okay.
You want to stay here?
Well, I want to go over and take a look at it. That's for sure, Gary. And I've got one more question for you, or something to think about, and I'm really kind of anxious to hear your answer on this. Gary, we all have spiritual gifts, things that we naturally have that we could share to help other people. What is your spiritual gift, Gary?
Oh, well, I like to say that it's riding on two wheels.
Yeah.
I think for whatever reason, I was very enthusiastic about motorcycling ever since I can remember, and just wanted one so bad, and I never got tired of doing it. At my age now, 66, it's still, I'd say, my favorite thing to do is ride my dirt bike. I'm a lot slower now, a lot more careful, but it's still really fun to do, especially when I'm done riding a couple motors for the day. That feeling of just total relaxation, and I think that was my gift.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for being my guest this morning, Mr. Gary Semics. Don't forget to visit his website online. He's on Facebook, and he's got a beautiful farm for sale with all this equipment and a track and just everything else. Gary, is there anything else you want to talk about this morning, or you think we've covered everything?
Well, let me just say that if you want to go to our website, go to GarySemics.com. It's
Yep.
the easiest way to find it. And make sure to go to the news section for those things. I appreciate Joe, saying that for me.
Sure.
And I just want to tell everybody that, obviously you like dirt bikes because you're on this channel. Man, get out there and have fun, especially during these troubling times where you can still go out and have fun with a couple buddies riding your dirt bikes, and be safe. Don't take unnecessary chances. That's part of the thing about riding dirt bikes is you got to be 100% focused on what you're doing and block out everything else. That's one of the beautiful things about it is you can get so into riding and the feeling of riding that you don't think about anything else. You can get into that zone of just riding. Be smooth and don't take any unnecessary risks, man. Just stay safe and enjoy yourself.
Gary Semics, thank you again.
Yes, thank you, Joe.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
I hope I didn't talk too much.
No, Gary, not at all.
Stuff.
It was great. I learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody else enjoyed it as well. But I'll be speaking to you again.
Okay, Joe.
Thank you.
Good, man. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Gary Semics. Got some great stories, and yeah, I learned a lot more about Gary Semics this morning than I'd ever known. So I do want to thank you all for tuning in this morning to Vintage Motocross Radio. Please don't forget to visit our sponsors, Motion Pro for especially tools, cables, and controls, Preston Petty Products, the legend continues, Amsoil, the first in synthetic oil since 1973, Full Circle Racing for rims, spokes, lacing, and truing for both vintage and modern bikes, and Vintco. Keep the ride going with over 650 products in their catalog. My guest next Sunday will be Steve Stackable. Don't forget to tune in Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for another episode of Vintage Motocross Q&A. This is Joe Abadi. Enjoy the rest of your day.